right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks. Hi everyone, Alexis here from Higher Journeys. So glad that you're able to join me today. Mary Rodwell, the new human, living in a new reality. That's what you're going to be hearing about today. This is a segment, actually two segments of a show that I had the pleasure of doing for somewhat of a short stint called Midnight in the Desert. That would be the former Art Bell, or I should say the late Art Bell's Midnight in the Desert. I had the honor of hosting that show. It lasted for a little while over the summer. And I decided, because there's such juicy material in the couple of interviews that I did with a couple of great guests that I had the privilege of having on the show, that I would share just a little bit of it with you today. Obviously, I don't want to overplay my hand here, giving you too much, because this is part of the Midnight in the Desert catalog. But I did get certain permissions particularly to have the full show, and I'm going to say this right now, full 2.5 hour show with Mary Rodwell over the summer, in which we talked about some amazing stuff on the members only section on Patreon. So be sure to click on the link that I will have in the description below so you can take in the full 2.5 hours. We do have the go ahead to share that with you. But for now, go ahead and listen to some really great discussion about, you probably know, if you know the name Mary Rodwell, she has been really digging into the dynamic that she refers to as the new human. What I wanted to know is, how is this new human coping within what many of us are calling a new reality? That's not the only thing we talked about, but it was definitely an area that I wanted to dive into with Mary. So there you go. Let's get on with the show. Very quickly before we do, I want to let you know that next week, and let's see, the date will be December 2nd, we will have none other than Christine Day, known to many as the Palladian Ambassador, back on the show. Christine Day. So be sure to tune in for that. It would help if you subscribe, because you'll get notified if you hit the notification bell, all these little to-dos, but we want to make sure that you get that show and all of our upcoming episodes, of which there will be many. So please be sure to hit that notification bell after you subscribe. Okay, think that's it. Now on with the show with my guest, Mary Rodwell. How cool for my very first show, Midnight in the Desert. I am here with someone from my future. Mary Rodwell. It's tomorrow, Mary, today, here. Hello, Mary Rodwell. Welcome. How are you?
Oh, Alexis, I'm good. Thank you very much. After a couple of coffees and a cup of tea,
There you
I'm
go.
doing well.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much for obliging us. I have to admit, I needed a little, I don't want to say hand holding, but I wanted to be in familiar company for my first show. And Mary, I always brag when we're together and when I'm talking about you, we have been on 3 continents together, speaking and laughing and talking and interviewing. She's on my show frequently. So listen, before I start yapping away, because this is a friend, so we're amongst friends. So Mary's gonna fill us in on a lot of stuff that she wouldn't tell everybody. So shh. But before we do that, let me tell you a little bit about Mary Rodwell, just in case you don't know. She is the founder and principal of the Australian Close Encounter Resource Network, also known as ACERN, the co-founder and director of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters. That's also called FREE. She's a former nurse, a midwife, a counselor, a hypnotherapist, and Reiki master. She's an international speaker. I know that. Researcher and author of Awakening, How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life. And I love this book, The New Human, Awakening to Our Cosmic Heritage. She's produced 2 award-winning documentaries, Expressions of ET Contact, a visual blueprint, and Expressions of ET Contact, a communication and healing blueprint. Mary has also produced 5 series of meditation CDs, such as Inner Alchemy, which you can find at newmindrecords.com. And this is a short bio, folks. We could go on forever, but we want to get to the chat. So once again, Mary, welcome. Hey, listen, how's it going in Queensland? What's going on over there in Australia, down under?
Well, that's a good question. Look, it's a lovely morning in our winter time. You know, if it gets below 15 degrees C, then I complain because it's subtropical here. So I'm used to decent weather.
I know you
But
are.
it's lovely, actually. And given what's going on the planet, I think I'm very blessed at the moment because we're not
Mm.
getting too much in my little town.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that for sure. You know, Mary, when you and I, well, we're chatting all the time, but I think maybe the last chat we had, you were telling me that, and this is an interesting thing, guys. Australia, maybe the entire continent, has had an influx of butterflies like everywhere, not just one or two floating around, clouds of them. What's happening there? What's good? Is that still happening?
Um, it's not as much now as though it was a few weeks ago. And I suppose the way that I found it interesting is, you know, you look for synchronicities, you know, in it, particularly in my field, where you start to look at what's actually going on multiple levels. And what I'd had was a story of a young Brazilian 10-year-old who told me about his experiences with butterfly men,
Yes.
where he was taken to a certain place, where he was told about things. And these butterfly men, he actually ended up being with them. And it was all about some kind of change in humanity. And of course, in the Netherlands, around about the same time I heard about this, was actually a crop circle, which looked like a butterfly or a butterfly man. And since then, believe it or not, there have been a number of people talking about their experiences with beings that look like, you know, butterflies, blue
This
butterflies.
is why I brought it up. You got me there because look, this is an anomalous situation. We know that if anything, with the state of our planet and climate change, etc., that many of our species are dying out, and butterflies, not the least of which I know here in New England. I've barely seen. We have monarchs, barely seen any. So you're telling me this a while back was clearly anomalous. And the interesting thing is when I asked you, is the mainstream news picking up on this? You said what? No. You think they know something that we don't? Or not we, I think we kind of know. What's going on there? Are they not? This is an anomalous thing. Are they not covering this?
Oh, look, you know what mainstream narrative is? It's all about well, I call it the news, the doom and gloom show, because basically that's what it is.
Mm,
The bottom line is the narrative is all about what they want us to focus on. As anyone who's listening to these kinds of broadcasts know full well, we are being misdirected the whole time.
mm-hmm.
And there are layers and layers. But what I'm hearing from many people who are intuitives that are tapping into the biggest shift that's going on this planet is that this is a very significant year for
Absolutely.
humanity. And this
Absolutely.
is really where I'm focusing because many have predicted certain changes this year from something significant in February when it started really ramping up right through to June and July, and also December
Mm-hmm.
is a significant one as well.
Absolutely. I'm so glad. I don't know whether you had a chance to tune into the to my opening segment, but this is exactly what we talked about. As I mentioned, everyone, Mary and I were together at the time of the conjunction in Uluru, where we both felt very, very viscerally that something big was on the horizon. Not even with the knowledge that this was a very important time, but I mean, this is the stuff, Mary, that folks have been talking about for eons, really. Next to obviously 2012. So yeah, absolutely. Well, so many things I want to get to. We're gonna have time because we'll get you for the full show. I'm so excited. I want to dig in right away. You and I have talked about this before, but we're going to talk about the new human, of which you feel there are quite a few here now, and perhaps have been. But even more so, I want to open by talking about the intergenerational link, family encounters. You write about this in The New Human. We talked about this. I believe we did a show in the UK where we talked about a particular family where I think I can't. Was Fran one of the young girls? The father was involved. I don't know if this is going to jog a memory with you, but essentially we were talking about a whole family that was having encounters, and it turned out that there was a very serious intergenerational link. So let's dig in there. What have you been finding out of late with the intergenerational link?
Well, as you know, in The New Human, I wanted to give what I call substance to what I was discovering in my research. And for those that don't know, that I've worked with probably now about 3,500 families and children with experiences, encounters of various kinds. And it was over the years, gradually it became really obvious. The pattern of experiences is that it is intergenerational for most of those that contact me. And so I would ask the person that contacted me, what about your siblings? What about your parents, your mother or father? Did they ever talk about anything unusual? What about your grandparents? And they would often say to me, oh, my nana was very psychic, and or my granddad was really into UFOs or whatever. And there right away is the flag's there. So that was really the first thing that I began to notice, because as you know, I've also looked into us as a species, and I am pretty convinced we're all hybrids anyway, but I can go into that in a minute. But the main thing was that what appeared to be going on with every successive generation was the individuals became more and more multidimensionally aware. In other words, they were perceiving beyond what we say the five senses. And by that, I mean they may see energy fields, they may see orbs of light, they may see spirit beings, they may see angelic beings, and also non-human intelligences, sometimes physical, sometimes energetic, because I believe that we're also perceiving on some level interdimensional intelligences, extra-dimensionals, probably trans-dimensionals, and ultra-dimensionals, as well as possibly visitors from our future. So we're really talking about a huge range of intelligence that is in some way or another interacting with humans. But the interesting thing about the children, and why I did 9 chapters particularly on the children, is that they haven't been programmed out of that awareness, which many of us have been due to our educational or religious beliefs or whatever. We're programmed out of acknowledging our multidimensional side, which is your intuition, which is those senses that sense energy fields, etc., or communication as well from these intelligences. And the children have a clarity which blew me away when I was hearing from parents saying, my child talks about going on a spacecraft, talks about being taught by beings with big heads and that are teaching them how to levitate or teaching them how to use their abilities, etc. And I've spoken to the children, and what is just amazing is the clarity. They'll say, oh yes, I have my friend who takes me places and shows me things. And one young lady explained that one of the beings takes her to another planet, but also shows her the species, how they change different species and how they do genetic manipulation with different species, and told her, and that's how they seed other planets. Now, this is the kind of thing that you don't get from a 7-year-old or 8-year-old in normal conversation. Right. And that's really started my research into what do they know, what are they aware of, including past lives, and talking about that as well.
As I'm listening, we've obviously had many conversations where this is what you've held steadfast to this information that you're getting. And, I can't help but put this additional layer, Mary, that we're going through right now. I'm not talking about the plan, but all of the anomalous activity that included. But the veil, the proverbial veil that many of us researchers have been talking about for years, having thinned, I feel that veil is just about gone. So if that's the case, coupled with what you're saying about what these kids are coming into or coming to this planet already sort of exposed to, they're here without the veil. What are you hearing now, let's say within the last 3 months, given all of the other, the potency energetically that's going on top of what you're hearing from the kids?
Well, certainly there are many adults contacting me, and some of them have been quite freaked out by how their awareness has been expanded. It's almost like they feel like they're between two worlds almost. And that has been really scary for some of them. And they've wanted to really touch base with me often just to ground themselves and to just check out, am I still okay? Because this is what I'm perceiving now. I feel like I've got a foot in both camps, two realities almost. And that seems to be exponential compared to, previous years. Mm-hmm. And I think this is just indicating there is something major that's going on the planet right now. It's almost like we're shifting into frequencies, if you like.
Agreed.
Or this to me has been something that's been hinted at for a number of years by a number of not only children but adults as well. They're talking about, and Dr. Lena Olson is a molecular biologist and experiencer, who she calls these children letter people, because she's one and has had these experiences all her life. And she's almost like we're separating out into two frequencies, low frequency people and high frequency people. And she said, and it's almost like a soul choice that some are going to stay with this reality we call the 3D reality and the fourth, fifth dimensional reality. In other words, a new kind of reality for those that are ready to go there. And this is what, the children are saying, is talking about these two worlds, or this new kind of earth where everything is different and beautiful, and that it's where some of us choose now to go, almost like, and it'll be interesting whether this is really about two timelines, or something that is similar to that. All I know is that it's becoming very tangible to people who are experiencing it.
I'm one of those people, Mary Rodwell. We've talked about that. This is not about my situation. I talked a little bit about that in the monologue, but I will concur and say I have had this absolutely unequivocal sense, particularly since all of this happened, that somehow we were transported. I don't mean it figuratively. I mean it literally. I called it the Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy is in her home in Kansas and everything looks the same, other than the fact that glasses are breaking because the house is moving, but everything looks the same on the inside. And then when she gets to Oz and opens the door, she realizes she's not in Kansas anymore. That's how I feel. I feel as if we have been transported. Does that make sense?
Well, it seems to be certainly some kind of understanding of what's actually going on. But what's fascinating that's going with that is this expansion of the multidimensional senses. They are seeing more with their physical sight. Their hearing is becoming more acute. Their sensitivity in their physical body is more acute. Many of them are actually struggling with the energy of the planet right now because there's so much fear and anxiety, and that's creating in them a lot of fear and anxiety as well. It's becoming quite toxic for them. So, if this was just one or two people here and there, you'd say, okay, maybe that's just them. But it seems to be more and more of the pattern of those that are expanding in this kind of way, this shift in their frequency, which is enabling them to see and experience so much more.
I want to make sure we all understand, when you say them, you are talking about the new children, yes? Is that who you're speaking of? Okay.
I'm talking not just the new children, the ones like yourself, the older models, as I call them, the older models and the older generations. You're not being left out. And that was one thing somebody said, well, what about us, the ones in their 50s, 60s, 70s? And I'm saying, look, we're all part of this. This isn't just about the children. It just means that we probably need a bit more help to accept it, integrate it, and work with it. And a lot of my work has been recently is helping people over that kind of shift where they're starting to expand. They're starting to be aware of what's going on around them multidimensionally, and they're wanting a kind of map or a way through that so that they can operate in a more balanced way with what's going on, because you've still got to be grounded. You've still got to,
Absolutely.
realize we're still on planet Earth and we still have to mow the lawn and feed the kids.
That's
so
right.
You can't go off and float around and stay there. You have to also be aware that you're in that space too. So my work is often about saying, okay, how can we ground you? But how can we help you understand what is happening to you on that multidimensional level with your senses and what's going on? And some are tapping into downloads of information. other intelligences, and they are a broad variety of intelligences, that some are very physical, but some of them are certainly, you would say there would just be a frequency or an energy, for example. So it's, what do I do with this? Am I going crazy? How do I manage that? And a lot of my work is about helping them to manage what's going on.
So are you clearly hearing from more individuals, we'll call them lay people, lay relative to the fact that they're not necessarily have a proclivity to these discussions. Are you hearing from more of the lay public who may have found out about you during this window of multidimensionality? Like, what the hell is going on here? Have you heard from people that you wouldn't normally hear from?
Absolutely.
Really?
I've never, I've not, I can't, in terms of being busy, it's become a bit ridiculous. And the interesting thing is that, I've sort of got a foot in two camps here. Part of me works in ufology in terms of supporting people with extraterrestrial or non-human intelligences side. And then there's the metaphysical, the spiritual side of it, where people who have been into, the angelic realm, or talking about spirit guides, or talking about more of the traditional ways of seeing these intelligences, and suddenly saying, well, I'm seeing a bald-headed guy with black eyes and he's blue, for example, and that freaks me out, because I thought I was only dealing with the spiritual realm without really understanding they are interchangeable. It's just a lot of the time our perceptions. For example, somebody with a religious kind of belief or perspective may see, what they think is an angel, whereas someone else without that belief will say, well, I'm seeing a light being. Actually, they're same in most cases. It's just people are now being challenged with their belief system. And this is the problem, is what is it that you believe you're seeing, to expanding that and saying, look, this is all in the same realm. It's not either or, it's actually the same thing. So more of those within the metaphysical realm are realizing that this is also incorporating what we call non-human intelligences, extraterrestrials, etc., as part of it. And that's a big shock for many
Absolutely.
people, because,
yeah,
it's like, it's okay to have the angels and the spirit guides, but it's not okay to have a bald-headed guy with black eyes who's blue, because that doesn't fit with a spirit guide, as far as I can say. So a lot of my work too is helping people past those program beliefs to actually expand enough within their acceptance of a greater paradigm. And that in itself can be very confronting if you're very religious or you're very church-based.
This is fantastic. And you paused right at the perfect time. We're going to be taking a break in a couple of minutes. But this is part of what I feel is the blurring of the lines of demarcation that we have been hoping and praying for, those of us that are in this research and are advocates of a multidimensional model of reality, Mary. And perhaps it has to come through shock of seeing the big-headed, black-eyed, blue-skinned being and God knows what else, including going through this might be part and parcel of that in some way. I feel there's an inextricable link there. So, yeah, that's fascinating and not surprising at all. Not surprising at all. So we're going to shortly take a break, but I want to continue down the road of talking about what's happening really all under the umbrella of what's happening right now. And also I want to talk a bit more about a very good point that you made about this. Those of us in the consciousness community broadly, I would say, have always wanted to, speaking of demarcation in nice, neat little buckets, wanted to describe certain phenomena in certain ways. In other words, there's a big rift still in the ufology community. Ufology is not paranormal. Paranormal is not ufology. After death communication or near-death experiences or shamanic experiences are not connected to an abduction. And one of the things I know that Free has done is really to try to blur those lines and show what you call contact modalities that are all connected. Everything is linked. Everything, it overlaps really. So maybe on the back end of our break, we can talk a bit about that with what's happening now, with Mary's constant discoveries of the new, I'm not going to say children anymore, the new human, and perhaps the old human becoming new in the midst of it all, and the experiences that are bombarding so many, myself included, that may have otherwise not been privy to such experiences, multidimensional experiences. Let's pick up, Mary, where we left off in terms of what I know Free has referred to as the contact modalities. Now, this, we're really kind of bringing in the experiencer or experiential element. When I say experiential, that being with non-human intelligence, and how all of that, those lines are blurring in terms of other modalities that would include the NDE, near-death experience, out-of-body experience, shamanic journeying, ayahuasca journeys, angelic experiences. There were a whole litany of modalities or experiences that were heretofore pretty much kept separate. And it was, I will say, Free that really blew the lid off of this in terms of connecting the dots where all of these, you cannot put them in buckets, they're all connected. So let's pick up there. Let's talk about that.
Well, it's really what I think is significant and not being really acknowledged by what we call the nuts and bolts ufologists, because they've always struggled to quantify the experiences and their encounters, simply because they don't bring bits of the craft back or whatever. But what was brilliant about, Free and continues to be wonderful is that they surveyed 4,200 people. They had 600 multi questions, and it was all conscious recall. This was not through hypnosis. And what we were discovering was, and this is really significant, that only 25% was in a physical state when they had these encounters. And that meant 75% was out of body. So part of the problem is for many people with their experiences where they said, oh, I had this dream where I was on a spacecraft and this and this and this happened. And I will often chuckle now when someone says that to me, because if it's a dream they've still remembered 10 years later, it's most likely not a dream. It's just that they've gone in an out of body state. So that's the first thing. And that's been one of the reasons it's been hard to quantify, because, we're still in a place where consciousness is being explored, where gradually we're getting the scientists that are more open-minded to look at consciousness in a new way. And that means we're looking at everything that proves we're more than our physical body. And that means also when we're talking about consciousness, what is that? But if you have had a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience, or whether you've done a remote viewing, for example, these are a classic for exploring with your consciousness in an out-of-body state, whether you call that essence, the soul, the spirit, or whatever. It doesn't really matter what name you give it, but it proves to me and many others that we are a consciousness that isn't trapped by our physical body. That is the first thing that came through more than anything else. But what some of the other fascinating things that take away the old preconceived ideas of encounters is we discovered that many people, once they came to terms with what was happening to them, were no longer in the fear place. And we have found that 85% of them had a psycho-spiritual transformation. Only 15% remained fearful of their experiences. That in itself is telling you something. And, this has been something that I noticed when I wrote The Awakening, because it was the transformation that was slowly becoming obvious to me, that people changed after their encounter. If you want to know something is real, the way you don't change dramatically in this kind of way unless something is very, very real. And that's what I had been seeing since I started, over 25 years ago with the individuals, how they expanded in their awareness from having these experiences. So psycho-spiritual transformation, 85% is huge. So all of this is in, and I will always say it's a landmark book because of what is in it and all the different, the information people have about their connection to these beings, their understanding of who and what we are, our links to them in Beyond, and the book's called Beyond UFOs, the science of consciousness and contact with non-human intelligence. And we're now going into looking at more of what people call the paranormal, which it is. I don't like that name because I think it's the true nature of who we are. And this is what the children are saying, that we actually have the potential to be, more aware, more connected, and to operate on a whole new level of reality once we get to the point where we're ready for it. And I believe these intelligences are giving us a helping hand to do that.
I agree with you. I've always said, Mary, that the paranormal not only is it a misnomer, it is not an epiphenomenon of reality, but perhaps the underpinnings of the reality that we experience. So I'm so glad you said that. And again, I'm going to keep bringing it back to this very, I say anomalous. It's just a different time. We're in a different time, different space, different rules of engagement. This is the time where all of that is ramped up and potent. And the person down the street from me, maybe, who watched football and, drank beer, and nothing wrong with that, but that was the extent of their exploration of life, are getting hit, knocked upside the head with some of these experiences. Some of these people are coming to me as they're coming to you saying, Alexis, because they know I'm into the weird. What's going on here? Interesting. Fascinating. Let me ask you a question. Now, I did a talk 2 years ago at the same spot in Australia where my thesis was unconscious contact. Are you an experiencer and don't know it? My thesis was essentially we could all be experiencers, but be oblivious to our experiences. Based on all of your research, what are your thoughts in terms of, and we're using the term very broadly, obviously, what percentage of the population, you don't have to give a hard number, but are we talking about the majority of the people could be experiencers from your perspective, although not aware of it? What do you think?
Well, all I can say is that it seems interesting to me, although there are genetic links with certain more awake experiences, these intelligences, and there's numerous ones that have got, if you like, they're operating together in some cases to raise consciousness on this planet. How do you do that? You actually target everyone, because we're all part of that and we're part of them. And you know that I've always spoken about our how we, I believe, are hybrid species. Well, these intelligences all have an agenda. And the agenda, I believe, for most of them, certainly I don't know with all of them, appears to be benevolent and appears to be that they are assisting those to wake up to who and what they are. And the interesting thing is it can happen really quickly. Somebody who suddenly sights a UFO and is absolutely amazed at what that actually means in terms of their reality or whatever. What's fascinating about that as well is they will have this huge shift in awareness from that point, because a lot of people don't realize when you see a UFO, there may actually be an interaction going on.
Absolutely.
You just don't remember it. And I often will say, after the sighting, did you feel different? And they would say, well, yeah, I found myself getting really absorbed in astronomy, and I want to find out about what's going on this planet. And I found myself obsessed with looking at X, Y, and Z. And the whole point is that's often first conscious contact with what I call family, the star family, if you like. But, this may be the way, and I have to say this, for me, this is all about, what I say is sort of like your soul agreement. You've decided at what point in this reality, this human experience, where you choose to wake up to more of who and what you are. And for some people, they may choose never to wake up. Yeah. But I believe the whole point is that it's the consciousness of the planet, not just the individuals here and there. There are some that have got certain roles, so they have to be more conscious. But others may not ever really find out or be aware or want to be aware because it scares them. And that's the other thing. Some people will say, no, I don't want to go there, even though they've, seen craft, or they feel something's happened and they've had missing time. They'll say, I'd rather not know, or
Absolutely.
whatever. So
Yeah.
That's the choice, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the soul choice of, I want to wake up, and somebody else saying, I don't want to know. Whatever they're doing, I'd rather not know about it. So I think this is a planetary agenda. But again, there is the soul choice where am I going to be one of those that wants to go to that next level now, or do I choose to stay in 3D because that suits me at in this particular life?